you want to fundraise and you've never done it before, you need to show traction. Because if you only get like one chance with the little bit of funding you have to build something and you guess wrong, you're kind of out of it. Like revenue is a lagging indicator. It's important, but it's like the last thing. What kills startups, generally speaking, feels like just a lack of momentum.
Hey everyone, it's Stephanie here. Now, you might notice that this is a different format for our channel. Well, I want to officially welcome you to our brand new podcast segment. It's called Silicon Social. I'll be inviting those from my tech circle in Silicon Valley onto the podcast, exploring the human elements of tech and going beyond just the technical and financial aspects. You'll learn how Silicon Valley functions from the people who actually make it happen: startup founders, engineers, lawyers, and the VCs funding the next big thing. We'll be exploring cutting edge technology, the future of work, and what gives this place its regular disruptive heartbeat. And who you just heard from is Mario Tarrabia, the founder and CEO of PartnerPage IO, an enterprise SaaS company that enables the world's fastest growing technology companies to build and scale partner ecosystems. Mario is an expert in enterprise SaaS, B2B marketplaces, and product led growth. He's also an old time friend of mine from San Francisco. He was an executive at the high growth identity management company called OneLogin from its super early days before becoming a founder. Today, you'll hear about his entrepreneurial journey, a deep dive into the tech partner ecosystem and why they're critical to SaaS company sales motions, and how he tackled the challenges of building products, finding talent, and securing funding as a first time founder. And whether entrepreneurs are born or made. Find out what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur in Silicon Valley and hear from someone going through it today in our tech macro environment. Check it out. Mario, I'm so excited to have you on this new show. When I was thinking about putting on this podcast video recording, the first person I thought of was you. So thank you so much.
I am honored. Thanks for reaching out and having me.
Yeah, of course. And for everyone watching, we go way back and we're great friends. And you've just been an inspiring entrepreneur and founder. So I thought we had to get you on. So why don't you go ahead and start off by walking us through your career path? What led you from OneLogin to starting PartnerPage?
It goes both ways, by the way, Stephanie. Like you've killed it in your career, and I've loved watching you grow, and also just seeing you like climb to the top of so many different things in your hobbies. So back at you. So One Login was really my first foray into like Silicon Valley. Um, I didn't know it at the time, but all the little tiny businesses I was always trying to start while I was in college were basically startups, but they were really service businesses, like building people's WordPress websites or like trying to set up networks at local businesses and make like a dime on the side. I met the founders of One Login when I was just out of college. I was in Orange County, and they had an office in Santa Monica, so up in LA. For those of you who aren't super familiar with Southern California geography, and shortly after joining OneLogin, we raised a seed round and moved the company to San Francisco. And I had always dreamed or wanted to go to San Francisco. I kind of grew up nerdy. I love software. I loved computers. Like I was learning, to program a calculator in C and at like a young age, just because I was curious about technology. And I played a lot of computer games, so it just made it an easy fit for me. So the idea of moving to San Francisco was there, and when the opportunity came, I jumped at it. So went to San Francisco, packed up a U-Haul, and drove up there with the founders of OneLogin, and that's initially what got me up there. From there, basically, I worked at OneLogin for the next 5 years, and I mean, the company color was green, and you could argue that I just bled the color. Like I was so interested in what we were doing. Believe it or not, like password management was having its moment. It was kind of a white hot center for IT security, and we were competing with a couple other companies. One of them went public, and ended up capturing the majority of that market, which was like, just a crazy thing to see happen. And I really went from being, one of the first employees to kind of figuring out like how to like fit into a company as it grew. And this actually became really helpful for me, this experience, when I started my own business, because I was able to kind of empathize with employees that we have today at PartnerPage that were all stars when we were 4 employees, but then we need to kind of reinvent a role for them when we got to 30, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've always worked at large companies, and so to hear about your journey working so closely with the founding team and working in this small, very high velocity environment, It sounds pretty exciting, but also could be pretty intense, right?
Yeah, it felt like everyone knew everyone. The founders were from old Zendesk employees, and the CEO of Zendesk was still talking to us. And you could ride a bicycle around San Francisco during this time, and you could see Dropbox and Uber and Square and Twitter, offices all along Market Street. So it was really like a heyday experience. And to the other side of this, I've never worked at a big company. The largest company I've ever worked at was probably like 35 people. OneLogin eventually got up to, I should say OneLogin, because they got to about 150 by the time I left. But before that, it was all small companies in Southern California that, were pretty good businesses. They weren't VC startups, but they made software and they sold it and they did a good job doing it.
Kind of transitioning over to when you took that big step to start your own company, what problem were you passionate about solving that motivated you to take that leap?
So I had run the partnerships, role at OneLogin, and I loved it. It was really fun because I got to kind of go out and evangelize what we were doing. And of course, like every good entrepreneur, like the majority of your motivation comes from a personal problem that you suffer. And I was sitting here looking at what I was doing with partners for OneLogin, and I was thinking to myself, this is so ready for innovation. Why hasn't anybody built software that makes this whole thing easier? So I just told myself, I'm going to go build it, let's go. And, I was spending nights and weekends teaching myself to wireframe. And what I really should have been teaching myself to do was customer interviews. But I think it's more fun to take your idea and kind of put it down on paper and say, here's what I'm going to go build. Unfortunately, like that then started the next 2 years of failing miserably, which I can talk about in a second. And what I mean by learning customer interviews is that at the end of those 2 years of trying to build software I thought people needed, I learned how to actually go out and figure out what they really needed. But I think the whole point is, if you believe something's inevitable, so you're like, I know something can exist in this space, and you fall in love with the outcome, you think that like building it is actually something you want to do, you can kind of work on it forever. And I'm always shocked when I hear of a company for the first time. Like you hear, like just recently, someone was talking about Clay to me, and I was thinking of all the companies I know named Clay off the top of my head. There's a few, but the one that's really growing very quickly right now is a data enrichment platform. And I was like, when did they start? And it was 6 years ago. And it's like, I just heard of them now. And they had to grind it out for a very long time, get the product market fit, probably have to go through some iterations, just to where I could finally hear of them for the first time. So you really have to have that resilience to like never stop working on the thing, to even get to the point to where it's like starting to look a little bit like it's working if you squint.
Yeah, and I wanna dive into that entrepreneurial grit that you need, but I do wanna understand the partner ecosystem space that
Mhm.
you really delved into. So in your view, what were the trends and challenges in the SaaS market traditionally, and particularly with regards to the partner ecosystem?
So we have this like saying in SaaS, which is, it's kind of like not even really a saying. It's just people look at the partner channel and everyone knows there are certain companies that do a lot of revenue through the channel. Atlassian, HubSpot, Shopify, and all of their e-commerce experts. And then you have all these other SaaS companies that do $0 through the channel. And when I say channel, it's basically the partners, the technology partners that bring customers to them, and the resellers and the service providers that bring customers to them. And of course, maybe this is just for big companies, right? Like Atlassian's huge, Shopify's huge, HubSpot's huge, so it must not be for me. But even small companies are able to get revenue from resellers and build these relationships that turn into sort of a reciprocity where they send customers to their partners and get customers back. But there's not a clear path on how to get there. If you're doing support, you need a support tool, Intercom or Zendesk. You need to sit there, wait for tickets to come in. You have metrics that you're hitting to resolve them. You're doing sales, there's outbound strategy, there's how do you send a good cold email, what's account based marketing look like. For inbound, there's all sorts of marketing, demand gen stuff people do, paid acquisition, content marketing. I know I sound like I'm just like blurting off a bunch of buzzwords, but when it comes to partnerships, like people's eyes kind of glaze over. They're like, okay, like what do we do here? I'll start by responding to the people who are reaching out to me, and the playbook is just very vague, and it isn't clear yet like what is the most repeatable thing. And what became most fascinating for me was when I started to think about partnerships as a form of like behavioral psychology and like motivation, where it's like when you start to look at some of the studies that people do around like habits in your life to like get healthy, and like habits in your life to like build routines, you start to realize like it's kind of similar to what you're trying to do with partners. You're trying to help them develop a habit of like bringing your product along when they're doing sales or marketing. And you can apply a lot of the tactics from this completely like other field to partner programs, and you start thinking of behavior and motivation and ability. And that's where I like kind of got this exciting feeling of like, hey, there's a process here, it's just not well understood, and maybe I can bring some like software and clarity to that.
Definitely. I mean, I think in my own experience working with partners, I haven't seen like a necessary playbook, especially as businesses are differ so much. But so just to describe PartnerPage itself, it's a partner directory tool that SaaS companies can use with their ISV or independent software vendors and
Hmm.
reseller partners, right? Um,
That's right.
this this is trying to solve that problem of automating and creating a playbook that folks can use to identify the right partners to partner with.
Yeah, and if you want to get like really, really, really drill into like the problem that it solves, and this is I made that joke at the beginning of like I built stuff that I thought people needed and ended up spending like 2 years doing everything wrong. Um, there's When I first started, I thought I'm just going to build this tool that everybody needs. Eventually, I learned how to do customer interviews. I went and did a bunch of customer interviews. I talked to a bunch of people running partner programs, figured out what the biggest problem they had was, and the majority of them said the same thing, which is like I just can't keep my partners motivated. They come to me, they shake my hand, they sign my paperwork, like we high five, and then I never hear from them again. And it's like one of the biggest, most frustrating things that a partner program manager at a SaaS company struggles with when they're trying to basically make progress. So we thought, hey, let's build a tool. Yes, it's a partner directory, but what it really is from an outcomes perspective is it gives me the ability to motivate my partners. So I can say, hey, work with us. I'll put you on my website. I'll showcase you. We'll tell the world about how you're certified in our technology, and that will build your credibility, build your reputation. It will also help you get exposure to new customers, and that's what these partners are looking for as well, sort of this kind of tit for tat reciprocity cycle. So it's a partner directory functionally, but the progress that it helps customers make is this lever for motivating their ecosystem to bring them customers and generate revenue for them.
That's great because I think partnerships can be so vital for a company's scalability. But I'm curious because in one of your forums, somebody had asked about, well, what about PLG or product-led growth companies where they're relying on the product to be the primary driver of customer acquisition, sales, retention, and instead of this traditional sales model. So how do you
Mhm.
think it fits into those kind of companies?
I think this is where, like, as an entrepreneur, you have to be really, really diligent in choosing a segment. In the beginning, you build like something that's better than the old way of doing things, but then you need to pick like a portion of the market to go after specifically. And for us, we are like, okay, are we going to go after the large enterprise? Are we going to go after, the small software companies or PLG companies, which is another way to skin it? With PLG software companies, which is by far, if you don't know what product led growth is, check it out. It's one of the hottest ways to grow right now. They have a specific set of problems because they're in their own way, they're their own type of companies. If you have a lot of companies signing up for your software or a lot of individual users signing up, like an Airtable or a Notion or you name it, one of these hot PLG companies, you can't really afford to get on the phone with them and help them because they're signing up for $5 a month. So the second, I or someone else gets on the phone, maybe a support rep or a customer success person to help this tiny company use Notion's losing money on that account. The lifetime value of that person might be really small. But because they're PLG, the great thing is they have hundreds, if not millions, of these people paying them that amount of money. And of course, there's an enterprise segment that they upgrade into as well. So, just to the point of that question, which is like, hey, companies are trying to use product more to activate customers. The answer is like 100%. And in some ways, that actually creates the need for partners in a new way, which is that because the product is driving all this demand into the app and activating it, and it's happening at a very low cost to the organization, so you don't have to charge a lot to make the economics work. When push comes to shove and they really do need help, how can they find a human to work with? And that's where the partners can come in and kind of fill the gap for a SaaS company.
I'm curious because you talked about wireframing and focusing a lot on finding the solution to a very specific problem. Um,
Mhm.
how did you start to build this startup, which requires a very strong team and product? Can you share some of the challenges and triumphs that you faced in building PartnerPage's original technology and product, hiring the
Mhm.
right talent to fill the areas that you didn't have, and landing on your current things like pricing model?
Yeah, love to talk about all of it. I think the first question is like, how do you get any traction at all? So, you're starting off, and this is important for anyone who's starting a business because if you want to fundraise and you've never done it before, you need to show traction. Like you can't just show up with the deck and say, I mean, you might get lucky and be able to show up with the deck, but in this day and age, 2024, which is when we're recording this, you need to have some traction that shows what you're working on is real, that sets you apart from other people who just have great ideas. So for me, I was able to go through a startup accelerator. It was called Angel Pad. And that kind of got me to quit OneLogin and start the journey. I don't think I would have quit OneLogin otherwise. I think I was just so dedicated to the business that I couldn't separate it from my identity. Um, but eventually I did. And I was able to raise a little bit of money through the accelerator and some friends and family to basically fund me working full time on this and paying a dev shop to kind of build prototypes. And that's when it becomes really important to have the problem figured out, or at least have done a lot of validation on the problem. Because if you only get like one chance with the little bit of funding you have to build something and you guess wrong, you're kind of out of it. You're kind of out of money. You're trying to figure it out. And that's what I did, by the way. I guessed and I guessed wrong. And we built the first version of the product that was something completely different that didn't solve a real problem. And then through that journey, you eventually hit this place where you're like, wow, I think I failed. Like I need to detach myself from this old product emotionally, try to see this thing with a new lens, go talk to customers, find a new problem, find the right problem. And once you do that and you have conviction that you've got the right problem figured out, build your MVP and start getting traction for it. And, fund it yourself, fund it with friends and family, like try to get someone, an accelerator to give you a little bit of money to build that MVP. Nowadays, you can basically build MVPs with, these tools that exist like Bubble and all these like no code platforms like Glide. And if you can get something out there in the hands of customers and get maybe 4 or 5 people using it and get to the place where they say like, hey, this solves my problem and I would be sad if it went away. If you can kind of get there, you're ready. Like you're ready for the next chapter, which is maybe to go think about either hiring um, and using revenues to scale hiring or go raising some funds. If you can raise a seed round, let's say that you've picked up a TAM that's really big and the investor you're talking to or many investors think that it's worth investing in. You raise 1 million, 2 million, whatever it looks like, maybe 500,000 if it's pre-seed. And then you have to go hire. And for me, and there's a lot in your question, so I'll stop here after this. But for me, the hiring part was a no-brainer because I had spent a lot of my time when I was working on this startup traveling. This was like a pre-COVID era, so I had like gone to live in Spain for a period of time. And when it came time to hire, I wanted to hire these awesome people that I had met abroad while I was traveling, for a bunch of reasons. One, because I started to see that like the technology communities and ecosystems existed all over the world. And they weren't just in Silicon Valley. There were great engineers in Sevilla. There were great engineers in, Uruguay and Montevideo. There were amazing teams in, places you would never expect to find them. And when you reach out to them and say, "Hey, I'm a Silicon Valley based person, but I want to work with you and kind of get this remote like team set up," most of them would jump at the opportunity because it was a chance to get connected into the kind of main artery of tech. And that was something that I thought was competing for talent in the Bay Area requires a lot of capital and a lot of benefits and a lot of things we couldn't compete on. But if you go to a market where talented people are and offer them the opportunity to get connected into Silicon Valley and start working at a startup that's based there, that can be a really great way to just offer them something they haven't had access to locally. So that was kind of our hiring trick in the beginning. And really, I was just fortunate enough to have such amazing people find us and say, "Yeah, I'd like to work with you as well," and bring their friends on and bring their connections from previous companies to PartnerPage.
Yeah, it's a win-win in that case. And I want to go back to something you said about not being too married to an idea and being adaptable to change what you're working on to solve a more crucial problem that people want. I was speaking to a
Hmm.
partner at a venture capital firm, and he was saying that I was basically asking, what are some weak points or weak spots that you've seen in successful startups? And they mentioned it's when a founder is solving for a problem that is very particular to something that they feel married to and not
Hmm.
necessarily what the business landscape or the market needs. And that can happen sometimes in technology, especially when they're building on something that they're really excited about, which isn't a fault
Hmm.
to them. But I think in a business landscape, to become a successful, like scaled startup, you have to pivot and change and identify the right market.
Yeah, it's true. If you have enough money, you can, funding, you can build lots of stuff, keep shipping, keep seeing what lands, and keep iterating. Most folks starting a company don't have the luxury of a big war chest. So what you have to do is get really good at the qualitative validation. So what are the characteristics of the right solution versus quantitative, where you're just shipping and measuring. And when you have to do the qualitative stuff, you have to actually get on the phone. You have to talk to people. You need a process for interviewing, to come up with like non-biased, no like information from the customer, that isn't them leading you towards things that they think you should build. Even then, you can do everything right. And your initial hunch can get you motivated, but you have to do that stuff to validate that there's market demand. And you can still pick like a bad category. And what I mean by bad category is like, and this is something I tell myself now, and I think I would tell any other entrepreneur, which is like, I'm super happy that you're motivated about this problem, and can we find a way for it to tap into like a giant addressable market? Like, is there a place where like, if your goal is to go public, like, is there enough dollars in this world that you're focusing on to even get you there? And you look at email marketing, it's like huge TAM. Like, everybody needs email marketing software. I mean, the amount of email marketing companies that are gone public is like, there's like 7 or 8 of them, and they've just resegmented that one category. It's email marketing for e-commerce, email marketing for tiny companies, for big companies. They're all public, all of them. And they're all very similar when you squint and look at them, right? They all do email marketing, but they all have the features that kind of close the gap for their segments. And even these big email marketing companies like HubSpot, now they're going after the next TAM, right? They're going after Salesforce. They're building the CRM, and bolting on more TAM into their existing buyer's budget. Yeah, so I think that VC brings up a good point, which is like, you have a personal problem and you're motivated by it, but does it have the characteristics of something that can scale to being a publicly traded company? And there is a little bit of magic that you have to pull off there to figure out that path.
Yeah. A lot of magic, grit, hard work, experimentation, and just not giving up. Which brings me to I want to talk about entrepreneur mindset. It involves obviously ideation, execution, delegation, fundraising, pitching to investors,
Mm.
navigating valuation. Can you walk us through your experience with this process?
Yeah, 100%. And we'll specifically focus on like the VC like backed one, because that, fundraising and pitching to investors, of course everyone should make a decision of like, do I even need VC money? Yes or no? Maybe I can scale this myself. But it's assuming you're like, yes, I'm going to go that route. Fundraising is miserable. It's miserable for everyone involved. It's also very humbling and very fun. Every time I put together a deck pitching the business for a fundraise, I have so much more clarity around what we do. And I think that that's just an important exercise for anyone. Even if you end up not fundraising at the end of putting your deck together, just the clarity around what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it could potentially get to the large outcome of create like that you have to think through in creating the deck is, super valuable. In terms of just that word like grit or resilience, at some point, like, I think a lot of us have a lot of our identity tied up in our careers to a degree. And at some point you become the business. Like, it sort of more like melds into you in a way where you like wake up and go to sleep thinking about it. And that's okay, right? That's not a bad thing. The bad thing is when it brings like a sense of anxiety or urgency or stress that like you maintain at all times. And there's certainly been times in my life when like I'm like, wow, I just like woke up and my jaw is sore because like I was like clenching my teeth all night. And I think that comes from, a place of like feeling like you can control something, but that you're not doing what you need to do to control it. And startups are full of that. So part of the journey of surviving the dark times of figuring out product market fit is also figuring out how to like really control your emotions and like figure out the system for you, whether it's fitness, something like reading, therapy, like good friends, trying to find healthy habits, not like drinking at a bar, like, to de-stress. Figuring out those healthy habits that can reinforce your mental sort of wellness so that you can then wake up every day and have that energy to grind on the product market fit grind. And for me, it's gone through many iterations, but I have all sorts of weird things that I do, in order to stay in that positive place. And just to kind of like swing back to the original question, because we can go to those hacks later. The whole process of like fundraising and like raising money and talking to investors, it's daunting and it's difficult. It's fun. It's especially fun when you have traction because it makes the whole thing easier. So, if you're out there trying to pitch before you've really done your diligence on the validation side, you're going to end up, even if you get someone to say, hey, I want to invest in you, you're going to end up with a valuation that you don't really command. You're going to kind of take what you get. Or if you happen to be in a white hot sector right now, it's AI. You might end up with just something a little bit inflated because of the sector. But nothing will ever replace the work you have to do, regardless. Like, you can either do the work before you raise funds or afterwards, but you have to do the work of figuring out your problem and your solution. And I think it's better to front load that because, I'd rather raise money once I know what I'm doing than, not know what I'm doing and risk doing the wrong thing. So that's some of my thoughts around that.
Yeah, and even if you do have an inflated valuation, I think that does put some more pressure on you and your team to deliver outsized returns
Hmm.
for the investors. So it's a different kind of problem to have down the road, right?
Hmm. Yeah, you just kicking the can down the road. And hopefully everyone who's raised at a big valuation can deliver that 10x return, because they will find that big TAM in product.
Exactly. Going back to the resilience factor of it, one of my favorite podcasters, Scott Galloway, says that, he's gone through ups and downs of his own founder journey, and his core competency is his ability to get punched in the face and then get back up again. And it's really about how you respond to what happens to you. So,
Hmm.
do you agree with that? What's your view been on luck and resilience?
Yeah, I think everyone who's ever started a company agrees with that. The amount of times you feel that like gut wrenching punch in the stomach where you just feel like your stomach drop. And it's often just because we're telling ourselves something that's maybe not true, but you feel it, like it's a great mirror to like kind of stare at yourself. And it's the same with like management. Like once you start scaling and hiring employees, like and you start building a team and leading, that is also another mirror that you get to kind of look at yourself in. And it's kind of like a funhouse mirror, you're kind of looking at yourself and you're like, oh, that's like looks a little weird. Yeah, standing back up after getting knocked down, yeah, I think if you have high motivation, you can always get back up. If you fall in love with the outcome, you can always continue to work on the thing. I think what kills startups, generally speaking, feels like just a lack of momentum. You just feel like you've stagnated and you're not making progress. And I think that can happen from maybe looking at the wrong thing as progress. Oftentimes, folks think like, I need to build software and that's progress, and I need someone to buy that software. But sometimes just simple insights and learnings can be progress also. Like revenue is a lagging indicator. It's important, but it's like the last thing. And like along the way, you have a lot of things that inform your progress. So if you can be mindful of like the success you're making on the small things, just like in the gym, or like when you're running, you're like, oh, I shaved off a second on that third mile of my 5 mile run. If you can also see the little wins as part of the journey and like not just focus on the negatives that are like red hot in your mind, that builds that resilience a little bit. So I would agree with him on that 100%.
I feel like people naturally do have that outlook and you can build that, I guess. But there's this fundamental question of whether an entrepreneur is born or made. Are
Mm.
they born with certain traits? Do you think anyone can be made into one? I know certain people have very strong opinions about this, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think I was more made than born into an entrepreneur.
Really?
I don't know.
I totally disagree with that.
Yeah,
Knowing
maybe
you.
that's just like a nurture versus nature thing. I always think back to this memory when I was like a little kid. Um, I learned to make keychains in like third grade with like beads. They're like little lizards and little like dogs. And I had this like moment where I realized I was like, if I can sell these, I can get more beads and I can make more keychains. And I was like a really young kid at the time, and I like started to put together like in my mind like what it would be like my first little startup. And I went about selling these little keychains for $3 or $4, going to the Michael's like art store, buying more beads, like making more of these things. And at that point, I feel like I started to learn, like I started to fall in love with like the hobby of entrepreneurship. So I feel like I was kind of made based on that, but arguably something happened before that made me even think that I should sell these things. So there
Yeah.
are a lot of environmental things that kind of push you in one direction or the other.
But I feel like if you were to gain that as a young child, then in my mind, you were born for it because you were already,
Yeah.
leaning towards that kind of opportunity, whereas most people don't even think to do that. So
Yeah.
I think compared to a lot of people, you were born and continued to strengthen that trait over time. And honestly, in the recent times, like you've thought of ideas to, use affiliate marketing or to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
like your ice chest idea. I don't know, you just have all these ideas that I see
Yeah.
you think of all the time, and I'm always impressed with your initiative that you have.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
risk
thanks for that.
tolerance
Yeah.
too, right? Risk tolerance?
Yeah, I feel like that's a big one. I've started to realize like how strange it is that I have very little problem with risk. Like I'm like, "Oh, like bet everything on like red?" Like, "Sure, go for it," you know? I feel like a lot of folks pause and kind of, and I think it just comes from this feeling that like no matter what happens, like, we can always pick ourselves back up and stand back up and rebuild. It's like a sense of feeling of control over outcomes, not because you're going to get the outcome you want every time, but because when you get the bad one, you know how to get back to where you want to go. Yeah, so I agree with that a lot. And I am very competitive. I do play a lot of chess now, but I used to play a lot of other things when I was a kid, and that was like super motivating for me. So I think that helps a little bit with the journey of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, oh, even if you lost on red, you're still willing to put in more chips to see if
Hmm.
you'll win again. But obviously, there's more thoughtfulness and a
And for the
lot
record, I hate
more
gambling,
strategy.
but yeah,
Yeah, it's
I know I
not
don't actually
gambling.
gamble, but yeah,
More strategy, much more strategy and work goes into it.
yeah.
Okay, so now that you're on the journey, looking back, what surprises you the most about yourself once you became this official entrepreneur?
I think I think one of the there's so many life lessons that you learn along the way. One of my most recent things that surprised me that I think was good and has been really like just like great along the journey was just like my willingness to like work on things that help me become a better leader or maybe even a better like IC in a certain way. And again, like I mentioned, the whole concept of a mirror and like a funhouse mirror. Like once you hire your first other execs in your company, like you now share the burden and the joy of like making decisions. And it's the same when you hire employees too. But there's this, when your identity is the company, you go through this process of like, you feel like kind of weird, like handing off pieces of your soul to these other people. And finding that like middle ground where you can collaborate and also like create the space that helps other people grow like is also a form of growth. And I think in me, like I just had never had those experiences. They were all like I'd always been an all-star IC who achieved way more than I needed to, and I knew the rules of the game and I played it really hard. But at some point you have to set the rules of the game for other people, and that requires being just really passionate about their growth and like their opportunity as well as how it impacts the business. So I think that mindfulness and sort of just like high level view surprised me. And it was more like do or die. It's like either learn this skill set or like your business isn't going to grow and succeed. And I think a lot of leadership books are about this particular challenge of growing from like the IC/slash all star founder to like a CEO, someone who can actually manage and scale.
Yeah, nothing like a forcing function to learn new skills. And I agree. I think becoming an effective leader is when you are ready to pass the torch and you're ready to share your learnings and share the wealth with other people. I
Mm,
myself going through that journey as well. So, okay,
mm,
I do want to kind of wrap up soon, but you mentioned a
sure.
little bit about defining success by other metrics, not necessarily just revenue and certain outcomes, but things along the way. So, for you, how do you define success for yourself as a founder, as a leader? What are your long-term goals for PartnerPage? How will you
Mm.
measure your achievements at the end of all this?
Well, I'll start with the partner page goal, which is like I would love to build a publicly traded company this time. I say this time because OneLogin didn't quite get there, and I feel like I did help really build that. I've already got the stock ticker picked out in my mind. I'm like I live in New York, like the Nasdaq's right over there. Like that's the game plan, right? Yeah, and that journey is often not clear, right? It's like there's a joke. It's like do one, do two, question mark. Like three is like revenue. Figuring that out for the business is the goal. There's also a mission to the business, which I believe strongly in, which is we're helping like service providers get access to customers. We're helping customers find the right service providers. Like we're helping software companies scale their programs. And so there's like a really beautiful impact that the company has on helping small service providers and medium-sized service providers grow, which enables them to hire and scale and create jobs and, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll leave it at that for now. Personally, for me, I think meeting the challenges that arise day to day and doing it with like I always say like be cool as a cucumber. Having the emotional resilience and just like taking the time to be critical and like be a part of the solution and guide everyone that's working on problems to it. That's something I really hope I really want to do more of and achieve for myself. On a smaller level, just personally, is when and I do still do a lot of IC work. Like when I am participating in sales or product interviews or making wireframes to help build something, just making sure that the output is very excellent. It's not that it's necessarily like big and polished, but like that it's right, that I did the hard part of the interviews to find the problem, and I got the wireframes built, and I did the UX research to make sure, just never really passing up an opportunity to take out the trash. It's like my metaphor where you like walk by a trash can and it's full and you're like, I'll take it out later. I'm sort of like, no, I'll do it now. Like clean up every single corner of the house. But in this case, the business is the house. So I think that's kind of how I define my personal success around the business. And of course, the age old adage that the journey is the destination. If you're not enjoying it, start there. it should be fun. It should be hard and it should be stressful and at times not fun, but it should also have times where it is fun. So make sure that there's, those times exist and they probably do. And we're just not telling ourselves they're there. So being mindful of that, super important. Yeah, I can go on and on, but I'll leave it at that for now for my personal things.
All right. Well, okay. I want to wrap this up by doing a fast five quick
Cool.
questions without too much thought. And let me know because I'm going to start whenever you're ready.
Take it off. Let's go.
All right. Favorite productivity hack?
Always have a water bottle nearby. Stay hydrated.
Same. VC funding or bootstrapping?
I think VC funding.
Okay. I think there's many people in that bucket too. All
Mhm.
right. Favorite tech that you can't live without?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm looking around my desk. Honestly, right now, my favorite piece of tech that I can't live without is probably I wish I had something more interesting, but it's probably my Kindle. I do read a lot on that thing, so we'll stick with Kindle for now.
That's your Zen mode. I love it. All right. AI, friend or foe?
Best friend. I use AI for everything. Like if I have a chance to talk to Chat GPT about anything ever, I do. And it's amazing. And learn how to do that because that is like the cheapest therapist you'll ever have, the best advice you'll ever get, the best guru coach you'll ever have. Like it's objective and it will help you.
Yeah. Advice, copy editing. I love it too. Okay.
Yeah.
If you weren't an entrepreneur, you would be a.
Ooh, good question. I'd probably be probably a carpenter, which it runs in my family. My father was a carpenter, and we worked at a cabinet shop for a long time. So I like building things. I like projects like that. So probably go down that road.
Yeah, having been to your place, I can definitely see that. And also, I think, just you speaking to all the ways that you find ways to stay happy and, measure your progress by just enjoying the journey, I completely see that. Every time we hang out, I'm always very impressed with how at ease you are, how you still find time for your hobbies, you still build community around you. So I don't know how you do it, but I'm just impressed, Mario.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, like I said, it goes both ways. I won't list off all your achievements, but there's a lot that I admire. So thank you for the kind words.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for hopping on the show, and we'll see everyone
Yeah,
next time.
great catching up. Thanks for having me. See you, Stephanie. Bye.